And good to go.
Good evening and welcome to this Zoom Candidates Forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. I'm Cheryl Barnes. I live in Kansas City and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. The League and the right for women to vote is 100 years old, and I'm pleased to say that both are still very relevant and important. We're organized at the local, state, and national levels, and our membership is open to all people of voting age. We're a nonpartisan organization and do not endorse candidates. We're issue-oriented, and after careful study of an issue, and when consensus of an issue is reached, we advocate at all levels of government for our positions. The League is well known for voter service activities, taking part in voter registration as well as candidate debates and forums while bringing focus to the issues. We're going a little bit high-tech this year and live streaming on Facebook and Zooming. We'll post a forum on YouTube in a couple of days. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to the candidate for being so responsive to voters. Our thanks also to Brian Ellison for moderating the candidate forums. If you don't recognize him, you'll probably recognize his voice from his time on KCUR. We also want to thank the members of the League's Forums Committee for planning and organizing this event. Because of the nonpartisan nature of our forums, campaign literature cannot be shown. We welcome and appreciate the participation of these candidates. To minimize distractions, you may have noticed that we've muted the audience audio and video so we can concentrate on the Missouri Senate 7 and 9 candidates. Our timekeeper and committee chair is Anitra Steele. If you hear a tiny bell ringing, it means a candidate has gone over his or her 90 seconds and he or she may be muted. We have somebody behind the screens who does that. The idea is to answer as many questions as we can get to. We'll turn it over to Brian now.
Thank you, Cheryl. It is a pleasure to be with you as always, and a pleasure to be with our candidates tonight. This is obviously, every election is an important election, but in many ways this 2020 election feels especially important to a lot of people across the state of Missouri. And so every vote counts, especially in the state Senate. There are 34 state senators in Missouri. Each of them represents something like 175,000 voters, which means that of those participating in tonight's debate, or perhaps those not participating, 2 of these people will end up representing 350,000 people in the state of Missouri, mostly in Kansas City, Missouri. And so this is an important event, and I'm grateful to all of the candidates for being part of it and to the League for inviting me to moderate tonight. I want to introduce our candidates. First of all, running for the Senate District 7 seat, we have 2 of the 3 candidates on the ballot tonight. There are 2 Democrats who will be facing off in the August 4th primary. One of them is former Representative Michael Brown, who is not with us tonight. The other is Representative Greg Razor. So Representative Razor, welcome. The other candidate in that race is from the Green Party, Mr. Nathan Klein. Mr. Klein, welcome to you. Running in the 9th district, we have 2 Democrats who will be facing off on August 4th. Mr. Ryan Myers, welcome to you, and Representative Barbara Ann Washington, who is here as well. There's also a Republican running in that race, though and we did expect him to be here tonight, but he has not appeared yet, and that is Mr. David Martin. All right, we're going to rotate in a different order with each question, and I'll try to give you a sense of who will be answering the question first before I ask it, so you have at least a few seconds to prepare. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question, and there will be a time signal, a 15-second warning bell, followed by 2 bells indicating that time has expired for that question. At the end of the night, there will be a 2-minute closing statement from each candidate. There is no opening statement, but I'm going to ask you a pretty open-ended first question so you can introduce yourself. My first question, which will go first to Representative Razor, is introduce yourself. Tell us your background and qualifications and what your top priority would be if you were elected to the Senate. Representative Razor.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this tonight. My name is Greg Razor. I am currently state representative in the 25th House District, which is essentially the Plaza, Brookside, Waldo, and parts of South Kansas City. You may hear a twinge of an accent when I speak, and that's because I was born and raised in the Boot Hill of Missouri on a cotton farm. Was educated at the University of Missouri in Columbia, and moved here to Kansas City about 20 years ago and fell in love with the city, and this is home. I have been involved in nonprofit fundraising or public policy of some sort during my professional career. But prior to being elected, I worked for Senator Claire McCaskill for 8 years in her Kansas City office, and then was talked into running for the state house and now for the state Senate. What I've learned in the last 4 years is that there are a lot of things that Missouri could be doing to make ourselves really great, but we are failing to do the basics of state government. When we haven't increased our road fund in a quarter of a century. We are seeing people on unemployment who are having difficult times getting that because the computer systems that the state haven't been updated in years and years. We can barely do the basic functions of government anymore because of the Republican supermajority that has busted up our budget. We've got to focus on that, and we've got to focus on so many other issues. I'm excited to get to Jefferson City and get to work.
Thank you, Representative Razor. Nathan Klein. And you're muted, which was the first time I'll say that tonight, but perhaps not the last. There you go.
Thanks so much for having me tonight, League of Women Voters. Great shout out to them. My name is Nathan Klein. I'm a lifelong resident of Kansas City, Missouri. I'm a worker. I've started in the hospitality industry, worked in the hospitality industry for 25 years as a manager in hotels, restaurants, catering. I'm a manager of large organizations. In 2013, I took a big pay cut actually to enter public service. I now work for the Kansas City, Missouri City Planning and Development Department and Director's Office, and I find it very, very rewarding, and I'm dedicated to public service. I'm most concerned. There's a lot of things to be concerned about. But whatever you're concerned about, the number one thing that we have to deal with in our society is the influence of money in politics. And, that's why I'm running as a Green Party candidate, because the Green Party and Green Party candidates, we don't take any campaign contributions from corporations. We are honest brokers, and that's what you're going to get with me. I go to Jefferson City, and I'm going to be the only honest broker there, because I'm the only one that's not taking money from corporations and rich individuals. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Now we turn to the 9th District, and we'll go first to Mr. Ryan Myers.
All right, hi everyone. My name's Ryan Myers, and I was born and raised in South Kansas City. I'm a product of the Raytown School District, kindergarten through 12th grade. I have a degree in economics from Kansas State University, so any Jayhawks out there, don't hold that against me. I'm also a commercial real estate appraiser, so just an average normal guy. I currently serve the city of Raytown as Mayor Pro Tem, and I'm on the city council. And why I'm running is I want to bring my record of results, whether that's rental regulations, which has made Raytown cleaner and safer, or TIF reform, which has saved our schools and taxpayers millions of dollars. I want to bring that to the entire Senate district. Additionally, I want to make sure that we have additional COVID-19 relief for employees and small businesses. So that's why I'm running.
Thank you, Councilman Myers. And finally, Representative Barbara Ann Washington.
Hi, I'm Barbara Ann Washington. I'm currently the state representative for District 23, which in Kansas City runs from Independence Avenue to 35th Street, from Troost Avenue to approximately the 435 area. I've been in the State House for 3 years. Like everybody else, I'm a Kansas City native. Unlike them, I was educated in Kansas City Public Schools, went to Southwest High School and graduated in 1985, attended the University of Missouri and their famed School of Journalism on a journalism scholarship, went to the University of Missouri, Kansas City for law school, and I have an MBA from Avila University. My priorities would be to continue to do some of the things that we as Democrats have already been doing. My community has a significant amount of violent crime, so to continue to work on sensible gun control legislation and ways to make the criminal laws applicable to be fair to all people that are charged. Additionally, to continue to bring funding back for workforce development and create programs like I did this year and last year for workforce. And finally, to make sure that we have adequate education, because without an adequate education for our children and our students, then we will not have a future in our community. So hopefully I did not go over 90 seconds.
I think you're good so far. Thank you all. Let's move on to our next question, and it's about another issue that will be on the same ballot as all of you on August 4th, which is Medicaid expansion. Do you want to see Medicaid expansion pass in Missouri? It's question 2 on the ballot. And whether it passes or not, what would you do as a state senator to improve health care for low-income Missourians? We'll start this time with Ryan Myers.
So yes, make sure you go out and vote. I am in full support of Medicaid expansion. This is going to create jobs in our rural hospitals, which are closing down. Additionally, this is going to, I don't want to say save Missouri money, but it's going to increase federal tax dollars funneled into Missouri. And I think it should kind of ease some of the financial pressure that is coming to our state. Again, I'm totally in support of Medicaid expansion, and I look forward to it passing in August.
Very good. Ms. Greg Razer. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. Barbara Ann Washington, District 9. Representative Washington, you're muted.
Yeah, I did try to unmute. Right. I do fully support yes to Amendment 2 to expand Medicaid. Not only will it increase the amount of people that are eligible for medical insurance in the state of Missouri, on the ancillary side, it actually will save us money. Not only will we be able to pull down federal dollars that we can't pull down now, it'll save us money from people not going to the emergency room, because they will now have treatment. They will now have coverage where they can go to their primary care physicians or go to other physicians and specialists instead of always going to the emergency room, which ultimately costs us tax dollars as well. What will I do as a senator if it doesn't pass? We will continue to find methods to bring those 14 rural hospitals that have closed down in the last 10 years. My family is from rural America. I go to the Boot Hill often. In fact, I've gone with Representative Razer. For people to have to wait 2 and 3 hours to just get an ambulance is pretty atrocious. I've worked on budget for the last 2 years and always fought that money from DHSS goes to not only to Jackson County, where I'm from, but also to other communities. So as senators, we can continue to fight for that, look for other funding that still does come from the federal government to help, and to look for some of those holes where where people are not spending money. And we know that every year when they come to the budget, take some of that extra money and apply that to the rural communities and to low income people who do not have coverage now.
All right, next from the 7th District, Nathan Klein.
Well, yes, of course, vote for Medicaid expansion, but that's not even close to good enough, all right? We need universal government funded healthcare in this country, like every other, first world country in the world. I mean, we have a ridiculous healthcare system, and I'm not going to Jefferson City to fight for small victories, and I'm going. We got to swing for the fences on this stuff. We got to demand what other countries do with much less resources for their citizens. We spend more than twice as much money per person on healthcare as any other country in the world, and can't crack the top 20 in any healthcare deliverable. So thinking that these little incremental pieces are the right solution. Yes, vote for it, but don't. We got to go swing for the fences here, and we got to get outside the status quo, and we've got to look for universal government programs that are going to deliver these services to all people, regardless of income, qualifications.
Thank you. Greg Razer. Greg, you're muted still.
There we go. that's a big question to answer in only 90 seconds, so I'm going to try to talk fast. One, I think it's important to remember what Medicaid expansion is. First of all, yes, of course, I support Medicaid expansion. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, we had folks that got health insurance because they were seniors and they were on Medicare. They had private health insurance that either their employers provided or they were wealthy enough to purchase on their own. And then for the most vulnerable in our communities, we had Medicaid, but there was a big gap between people who were poor enough to qualify for Medicaid and who were wealthy or fortunate enough to have private health care. And so what the idea of the Affordable Care Act was to allow more people the opportunity through the exchange to get private health insurance and then to increase how many people were on Medicaid. We've done one, but not the other. So in Missouri, there is still the gap, and that's the gap that we have to fill. Because we haven't filled that gap, we're seeing these rural hospitals close. We're seeing health results go down. So this is vital. What will I do as senator to make sure that people have health insurance? Well, the first thing we all have to do is vote for Nicole Galloway on August the 4th. And then we've got to hold the governor and the legislator and those in charge of the budget accountable to make sure that we're properly funding this expansion. Because whether we vote for it or not, some of the folks in Jefferson City are going to want to underfund what we just voted for.
Thank you. I want to turn now to Kansas City and crime. Kansas City is on track for a record-setting number of homicides this year. Governor Mike Parson has called a special session of the General Assembly next week to address violent crime in Missouri. What do you think should be the role of the state government in fighting crime in Kansas City? And what do you hope happens both next week in the special session and in the next 4 years that you would serve in the Senate? I'm going to put that question first to, make sure I'm doing this fairly. Let's start with Nathan Klein.
All right. Yeah. Obviously, in Kansas City, we're having a record year, and that's not a good record. What is driving violent crime in our city? It's poverty and desperation. Okay. The police can't do anything about poverty and desperation. What we need is to make sure that all of our brothers and sisters have the bare necessities of life. Okay. And we need a party and candidates that will fight for that and understand that if you do away with poverty, you're going to do away with crime. If you don't do away with poverty and desperation, you will not do away with crime. We're suppressing the crime rate in this country by making Americans the most locked up people in the history of the world. Okay, right now we're not the land of the free; we're the land of the locked up. All right, and we have to turn that around. We have to shift funding from policing and the military, and we need to shift it to social services, education, health care, and income support that make sure that people don't fall into the desperate streets.
7, 3, 5, 5.
Our timer has some background noise. Apologize for that interruption. Go ahead, Nathan.
So I think that the only choice for that, these incremental solutions aren't going to get there. We need new solutions. We need systematic change. We need the Green Party, and we need to vote for Nathan Klein, send Nathan Klein to the Senate. That's what I think.
I think that is time, and I appreciate your understanding there. Let's turn to Greg Razor.
So the crime rate and the violence that we're seeing in Kansas City is terribly sad. What we're seeing from the governor with the special session that technically starts next week is a lot of issues that deal with what happens after a crime occurs and not what happens before a crime occurs. While there might be some good things that the governor wants us to deal with, none of it is going to deter crime. What we need to do is a few things. One, we need to have local control of our police department, and we need to make sure we have wraparound services. We need to make sure that, our kids in our schools, if they are failing, that is going to lead to more crime later in life. We need to get social workers in the schools helping those kids and helping their families. we need to make sure that when the police, when what would now be the police are called to a situation, perhaps the police aren't always the right people to be called to a situation. Maybe what you need is a specialized social worker. So we need to look at how do we have these wraparound services? How do we help people escape poverty and escape crime and not just punish? And again, I'll go back to the governor's special session that technically starts on Monday. It won't really start until after the August 4th election. None of those things that he is bringing us back for address the root cause of crime. So that's been very disappointing.
Thank you. Barbara Ann Washington.
Hi. With respect to the crime, yes, we are experiencing some tremendous records that unfortunately we have been breaking year after year after year for a couple of decades, which is why my community has unfortunately named Kansas City Killer City. So what do we need to do? I'm 52. I've lived in the city my entire life. I do believe we need resources, but not after the fact. We need resources now. I continue to remind people as a youth, I played sports through a city owned, managed, and financed community center. And we played with that league. It didn't have anything to do with your income. So if you were poor, if you were rich, or whatever the case may be. But what it did is it kept kids off the street all year around. There were summer job opportunities. There were a community center was a community center. So that's not going to be the total reason that we can get young people off the streets, but we need stronger gun laws. And we do need something for kids to do, something for young people to do. Even in college, I hate to say it, but when I came home from college, I had something positive to do every night. If I wanted to go to a party, it was safe. I didn't have to worry about getting shot. So we need to address the issues that are creating the crime and find out why 64128, 6413027, and the other zip codes have those higher areas. And all you got to do is drive through there and you will see despair. With respect to the special session, I'm in agreement with my colleague, Representative Razor. We're not going to address how to stop the crime. We're just going to address how to further punish people.
Right, and that is time. Thank you. Ryan Myers.
Okay, I am unmuted. So just to kind of piggyback off what Representative Razor said, I think this kind of comes down to what happens in the home. That is a main cause of crime, and especially violent crime. It's definitely socioeconomic, and I think that a big cure to this may be to make sure that, I know COVID has increased our unemployment rate to an exorbitant level. We need to bring that back with workforce development. Additionally, we need to make sure we have adequate mental health funding. And I know there's been some complaints by some of the current electeds about the DOJ and all the other alphabet bureaus from the federal government coming in. I know Mayor Lucas requested that requested help from the governor, and the governor may have reached out to the White House. Knocking on doors, I've found that people are acceptive of this. They're looking at that as a resource, and when they dial 911, they want to see police there. I think that adequate funding for police is requisite. Firsthand, Raytown cut their budget across the board in 2016, which included a 30-some-odd% cut to our police department. We saw firsthand what happens when the budgets are cut like that. We saw a spike in violent crime as well as drug crime. So I think that a combination of these things will help solve the crime issue in Kansas City.
Thank you. I'm aware from a couple of you that the warning bell is sort of difficult to hear. And so I'm going to ask Anitra if she would ring the warning bell just as loud as she can so everyone can hear it, maybe get it a little closer to the microphone. I do want to stay with this issue. Some of you touched on the issue of policing in your answer to that question about crime. And I want to zero in on that question because it has been so very much in the news. We've seen nationwide protests calling for reforms, in some cases for the defunding of police, including here in Kansas City. Meanwhile, Kansas City's police department is controlled by a state-selected board of police commissioners. As a state senator, how would you work to change policing in our city and our state? I'll go first to Representative Washington.
Hi. First of all, I would return to the idea of community policing and work to put that in statute since the governor currently controls the Board of Police Commissioners. In Camden, New Jersey, which is a highly violent crime area, they use the term defund the police to realign their police and create more of a community policing format. And their violent crimes went down, I think, over 50% in just a short period of time. Just recently, someone was killed who had an apparent, very obvious mental health issue. If we had community police that knew him and were in the community patrolling like they used to, they would have known he had a mental health issue and he may be alive today. And the officer that just got released from the hospital today just to go to rehab may have been able to save his own self and be able to go back to work. So I think we need community policing, and I think we need police that, as a Black person, I can trust and I'm not afraid of. So we need to work with desensitizing the police and creating a police department that is that we can look to protect us and not to be fearful of, as we saw in the plaza with the Black Lives Matter movement.
I'm sorry, I got muted that time. Thank you for that. The bell was very clear that time. Now, Mr. Myers.
Okay, Brian, can you ask that question one more time?
Sure. As a state senator, how would you work to change policing in our city and state?
So I think that we need to take a look at this between having a good conversation between the state level and the local level. Depending on what the definition of local control is, I may be in support of that, which may give our police department more resources. You know, I read a study this afternoon that said that more actual on the beat police officers generally reduces crime. And notice I didn't say the number of arrests go up. Just the presence of additional police officers in the neighborhood has reduced crime in certain areas, especially Washington, D.C. That was actually the test case. So I think that's one of the issues that could be taken care of. But I know that Mayor Lucas has put the question of local control on the I believe the November ballot, or he's planning on doing that in November. You know, I look forward as the next state senator to talk about the merits of that in the legislature.
Thank you. Representative Razor.
So I want to go back to something Representative Washington said about needing to have a police force that, you know, as a Black woman in the Black community feels comfortable with. Something's wrong when a large percentage of our population doesn't feel comfortable with the police around. And it's something that we all need to address. I think one of the ways of doing that is definitely community policing. I do think it's time for local control. So in November, when I go to vote, I will be voting for local control. However, it's before, because I believe we'll need the state government to give that control back to the city. Before I carry the water for Kansas City to get that done, I want to make sure that the decisions of how the police department will be governed is decided by the people of Kansas City. So I want leaders from all parts of our city, east and west of Truce, the Northland, South Kansas City, to come together, and every group has to feel comfortable with how we're going to govern the police department of Kansas City, Missouri. And in particular, our Black community has got to feel comfortable. We have to change this. We need to look at some policing tactics as well. And again, it goes back to those social services, wraparound services. We're using the police to address every situation, and they're probably not suited to address every situation.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Well, again, we have a society that has more resources per person than any society in the history of the world. And the reason for crime is not because of what the police are doing or how many police there are, how much money we're spending on the police. It's because there's too many desperate people in our society. I want to live in a society, and I'm going to fight to live in a society that has very few desperate, poverty-ridden, people in this society. Other societies with much less resources do this all the time. These are societies that have socialist, strong socialist histories and backgrounds. You can go to Western Europe, and societies with a lot less resources, because they put the resources, they invest in the people on the front side, in youth education, mental health, and the police in many of these countries don't even walk around with guns. Okay, that's where we need to go, and so we need to number one, we need to raise more funds for those types of things that remediate suffering in the population. And if we keep voting for the same parties, the same capitalist parties that basically are protecting property above civil rights, then we're not going to get out of this problem.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. This will go first to Greg Razor. One of Missouri's restrictions on the practice of abortion, the requirement that doctors have admitting privileges at nearby hospitals, is no longer enforceable due to a Supreme Court ruling last month. Even so, Missouri continues to have some of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. There's only one clinic currently offering surgical abortions in the state. How would you change Missouri's abortion laws? Or if you wouldn't change them, why not? Representative Razor.
Thank you, Brian. So I've had the unfortunate experience of being a member of the House of Representatives when the Republican supermajority passed essentially a ban on abortion services in the state of Missouri. I am pro-choice, proudly pro-choice. I'm proud to have the endorsements of both Planned Parenthood and NARAL. We have to stand up for a woman's right to choose. And I will tell you, we have gone so far the other way in the state of Missouri. A lot of my family would self-identify as pro-life. And even they were texting me that day on the floor saying, Greg, you can't vote for this. There's no exception even for rape or incest. The extremism we've seen in Jefferson City has gone to a point that even my conservative family is texting me saying, don't do this. We need strong voices who will be there. I'm not sure of Mr. Klein's position on the issue, but I'll tell you on the August 4th ballot, I'm the only one on there who is pro-choice. My opponent in August 4th has self-identified as pro-life, and NARAL has looked at his voting record and given him an anti-choice record. So I will be a strong proponent of women's right to choose.
Thank you. Nathan Klein.
Well, I'm going to sound a little like a broken record here, but number one, I'm strongly pro-choice. But like, I think everybody's anti-abortion. Everybody wants less abortions. How do we get less abortions? What societies have less abortions than the United States? What causes abortions? You're talking about young people that have, not a lot of resources. You're talking about young people that, don't have, a lot to live for, and we have to stop that. I mean, we have to shift our thinking, and we have to shift it radically. How are we going to have less abortions? Both sides want less abortion, and we have to reduce poverty. We have to reduce desperation, and neither of these parties are doing that. Both of these parties are protecting their campaign contributors, who are the wealthiest individuals in our society, and so I certainly will stand strongly in support of a woman's right to choose, and I will work hard to create a society in which young people have, and women especially, are in charge of their bodies and make the choices to be, when they're going to have a child, and have small and healthy families.
Thank you. Ryan Myers.
So I grew up in the Baptist church. I understand both sides of this argument. That being said, we're blessed to be in a country where individual rights are a thing. And as a legislator, I am not going to get in between a woman and her doctor. I'm going to let that be a conversation between them. And if there needs to be legislation going forward, that those two individuals that have that conversation make a decision. I want to make sure that those doors are open. and we have adequate access to that.
Thank you. Representative Washington.
Sorry, I was pushing the wrong button. I don't know if I remember the question correctly, but I'll answer it the best I can.
It's how would you change Missouri's abortion laws, or if you wouldn't, why not?
One, we know that in this state, we have people throughout the state, whether they're rural, suburban, or urban, that vote for people issues and non-people representatives. And the reason for that is the majority of our state is pro-life. So what we have to do is we have to continue to do what many of us have done, including myself, which is work to find candidates that are pro-choice. My mother would be 90 years old if she was alive, and she had a lot of friends who had abortions before Roe v. Wade, and that stopped her friends from being able to have children. So knowing that in the back of my mind, I will continue to fight for legal, safe abortions and a woman's right to choose that ability to have an abortion or whatever reproductive methods that she wants. Because although abortion is the #1 issue, Representative Razor and I saw that is not the only issue with respect to women's reproductive rights that came before Jefferson City this year that were restricted. So I would continue to file legislation and fight for legislation that protects a woman's right to choose, and also work to find candidates that can join me in Jefferson City that can help us actually provide women those rights.
Thank you. I want to turn to a couple of questions related to the state budget. Missouri has the lowest cigarette tax in the nation. Our gas tax is also comparatively low, and voters rejected an effort to increase it modestly just 2 years ago. Meanwhile, the General Assembly in the last session decreased the state's individual and corporate income tax rates as well. Increasing taxes requires a vote of the people in Missouri because of a constitutional provision known as the Hancock Amendment. Would you support increasing any of these or other taxes in Missouri? And is it time to ditch the Hancock Amendment? We'll put that question first to Nathan Klein. No, I'm sorry, I'm out of order. We should be starting with the 9th District. So let's start with Ryan Myers. I apologize.
Okay, so going back to it, in terms of the gas tax and the cigarette tax, absolutely, we need to raise the taxes on that. Just based on the last time that those taxes have been raised, I mean, inflation, those just aren't keeping up. Realistically, we need that funding, like Representative Razor touched on earlier when he opened up, was, transportation funding. We have to have it. Our streets and our roads are crumbling in Missouri. I think those two taxes are definitely something to look at. In terms of taxing people's incomes, I want to look at that as a last resort. I know with the property tax increase in Jackson County last year, that put a strain on people's wallets, and that is a required tax, which if you do cigarettes, that's a sin tax, so it's just based on consumption. So when it comes to people's incomes, I think that needs to be a last resort, although I would be in favor of it if it came to that last resort. And that's where I stand on it.
Thanks. Representative Washington.
The bottom line is no one wants their income taxes raised, but no one wants to continue to go without much needed services. The state of Missouri gets their income from two primary taxes. That is your income taxes and the sales taxes. So at some point we have to look to increase them as we are decreasing the services that we are providing to our citizens, especially our most vulnerable. We have an opportunity to look at the Wayfair case from the Supreme Court and increase internet sales taxes and apply those to our budget and help with education and other revenues. We have an opportunity, and I'm not saying I'm for or against it. I'm for that Wayfair tax. I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but sports betting is another avenue. And then we passed something really big in Missouri last year, and that is medical marijuana. And the income that is from medical marijuana, we can expand the number of licenses that we have that would bring us additional income. So we have to raise that gas tax. It has not been touched since probably when I learned to drive. And we don't want to say that's just been 2 years though. But we need to look at those avenues where we're not necessarily attacking your income, but we also need to look at the fact that
You can finish. You have 15
Oh,
seconds.
that our income tax, as it has decreased, our services have decreased as well.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Well, as you might have guessed from my earlier answers, I think that the state needs to increase its spending in investing in Missourians. Therefore, we need to raise revenue. Where do we raise revenue at? Well, where's the money at? We raise revenue by increasing the tax on the wealthy. All right, we have a steep income tax for the wealthy, and the sales taxes we need to reduce those, because that unfairly hits the working community. I think that certain use taxes for certain types of behavior that that the state wants to discourage, cigarette taxes, gas taxes, in the age of global climate change, in which we have to stop burning fossil fuels desperately. I think that those are appropriate. But things like taxes on food and the necessities of life, not so much. I think we need to reduce those taxes and replace them and exceed what our revenues are with, taxes on the wealthy. They've been hoarding a larger and larger percentage of the national wealth in this state and all around the nation. At this point, we have 3 Americans that have the same wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans, and we have to reverse that. And that we won't do it until we won't solve these problems until we do.
Thank you. Representative Razor.
Thank you for this question, Brian. So the answer to all your questions is yes. We need to increase these taxes because we need the revenue in the state of Missouri. We all like low taxes. No one enjoys paying their taxes. But I also enjoy having roads and bridges that are the best that they can be. That is great for the men and women that are going to be building them. It's great for business to get products from point A to point B, and it's great for the traveling public. We haven't raised the gas tax in a quarter of a century. Our income tax is still low compared to other states. The bigger issue is the corporate tax. So in the past 5 or 6 years, we have cut corporate taxes in the state of Missouri to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars of lost revenue every year. At the same time, for example, we're not giving higher education any increased funding. To put this in very stark terms, in 1999, the University of Missouri got 70% of its operating budget from the state of Missouri. Today, that's less than 20%. So if you're a family who's worried about your taxes going up a little bit, think about how much it's going to cost to send your kids to college. And that is because we keep cutting corporate taxes. We have got to reverse this trend. And if you look at the makeup of the General Assembly, it's not going to happen overnight. Whoever the next senators from Kansas City are, we are going to have a long-term fight on our hands. And I'm ready for that fight to start to reverse that trend.
All right, so I want to stay with the budget for this question and look at the other side of the ledger. As you've all indicated, the state budget is tight, and there is a high likelihood that this General Assembly session would not approve asking voters to increase the taxes that you've described. With the budget tight and growing tighter, education, higher education, social programs, healthcare, they all seem in jeopardy. If cuts are necessary in this coming legislative session, there or elsewhere, where should they come from? Start with Nathan Klein.
Well, I'm not going to go to Jefferson City to cut benefits. I'm not, or to compromise on that. I'm going to fight like hell, not only to hold on to that threadbare benefits that the state of Missouri offers to its citizens for their tax dollars. I'm going to fight to expand those benefits. So you're asking me, what am I willing to cut? I'm not willing to cut much. Okay. And, I think that, there needs to be some shift in some of the funding. We need to shift to tomorrow's infrastructure, with public, high-speed rail through this, and as opposed to endless highways. The city of Kansas City, Missouri cannot maintain the zillions of miles of roads. We need to start thinking about tomorrow's future infrastructure and build that and abandon some of this old infrastructure that's it's not sustainable, you know. So I mean, there is some shifts in emphasis, but no, I'm not going to agree to right now cut much.
Thank you. Greg Razor.
So the reality in Jefferson City is we have to balance the budget per the state constitution. We have to have an idea of how much money is going to come in, and then we have to set a budget to match that revenue. Revenue is going to be down. It's going to be down significantly, and people should brace themselves for a terrible budget outlook from the state of Missouri for the next fiscal year. When we look at where to cut, I think it's important to understand how our state budget works. It's roughly $30 billion in 3 equal slices of pie. One quadrant of that is money that comes from the federal government that we really don't have say of where it's spent. We have to spend it where Congress said. Another 10 billion of that is dedicated funds, of which the gas tax is a great example, money that comes in and is constitutionally directed towards one place. The last third is how we pay for everything else. And that's our sales tax, our income tax, our corporate tax. That's how we pay for our schools, our universities, our building maintenance, all the other things that we do. And instead of, just taking an axe and hacking up that third of the budget, we're going to have to use a surgical knife. And as much as it pains me to say that we're going to have to cut, we just don't have another choice. What we have to do is start looking at long-term to make sure that we're not in this position the next time a recession hits. We have to change the trajectory of the state, but in terms of the next year, things are going to be tough.
Thank you. Barbara Ann Washington.
So I agree with the 2 gentlemen that spoke. We definitely are going to have to make some cuts. So one of the ways that we can do those so that the pain is not as painful is when we cut, we've already made cuts. We went back in, we have gone back to session to finish the session out. I believe we went twice. I'm on budget, so I get confused. But we went back and we did cut the budget. And so when you have a full pie, you don't have to throw that whole pie away for that department. You can cut at that and still do what you can to provide the service, some of the services that we provide. For instance, we have really heavy workforce development that we had funding from the federal government. We really should not have cut most of that because the federal government didn't cut it. But we need to look at those things. Are there things that we're getting from the federal government that have not been cut that we can use to maximize what we have and combine with what we have? And then the governor did cut some of that funding down, but we still are going to, so instead of being able to get 1,000 new jobs with 1,000 new trained people, we may only be able to do 500. So we need to do some of that. And then we need to look at those budgets that agencies or departments or nonprofits or whomever has a line item did not spend all of their money, because that is a sense of savings right there. When they didn't spend all of that money, then we know right now that, hey, they had $10 million to spend. I'm just throwing out numbers. They only spent $3 million. Then we know that that's $7 million that we don't need to send back there, even with COVID.
Thank you. Ryan Myers.
So yeah, cuts are tough, and I understand that with the current economy, it's probably going to be a necessity for the next session. We didn't really plan for this in the short term. In the long term, I'm hoping that the things that we talked about in the last question, whether that be the cigarette tax, the gas tax, the Wayfair tax, or income and corporate tax, we can make some positive changes with those. Kind of roundabout way that I think the legislature could probably help us in the short term is to work on legislation that would affect TIF and other incentives. I can tell you that in Raytown, I passed legislation that has saved our taxpayers as well as our school district millions of dollars. That's coming from the property tax side of the equation. So while the state wouldn't be necessarily providing those funds, this would be coming from the property owners and increasing the dollars going to our school district.
Thank you. Next question, we will put first to Representative Washington. The coronavirus and COVID-19 have certainly reshaped this year in every way. The nation passed 4 million cases, positive diagnoses this week. What do you make of how Missouri's state government, both the governor and the General Assembly, have responded to the threat of COVID-19? And since all signs point to the virus staying with us for a while, what should they do in the months to come? Representative Washington.
I don't think that as a legislature and administrative branch or executive branch that we have taken the virus seriously. And people follow their leaders. And when the leader of your state and the leaders, the 197 or so of us, are not following and taking this seriously, then that means the 6 million people in the state of Missouri don't take it seriously either. There never should have been a big party in the Lake of the Ozarks that put us on the map negatively nationwide, worldwide. Actually, my brother's a producer in Doha, Qatar, and he put it on Al Jazeera. So it's going to be here to stay. And the only way it appears that this is going to work is to look at what other countries have been able to do. And that is, we've got to stop. We've just got to put a mask order in, and we're probably going to have to quarantine for just a little bit, because just that little bit of pain will save all of us in the long run. So I would give us a very low grade right now as a state and how we have managed this. It's costing us more money because more people are going to the hospital, more people are dying than should die. I think we broke a record today with more COVID positives than we've had before. So we need to look at who's been successful in bringing their numbers down and flattening the curve, and follow the lead. And we know that comes from masks, social distancing, and frankly, staying your butt at home.
Councilman Myers.
So generally, I would say that our statewide elected officials have dropped the ball on this one. We do need that mask order. We've seen in other states that have those statewide mask order, excuse me, we've seen cases go down. We've seen less cases in those states. That's definitely something that we need to be taking into consideration going forward. I believe that our governor should put forward a mask order. Additionally, going forward in the next legislative session, we need to be focusing on COVID-19 relief for our employees and small businesses. It's sad seeing some of these restaurants close. Some of my favorite restaurants are closing, but I think some of our small businesses, they need that relief, whether it's from the federal government or from state government.
Thank you. Representative Razor.
I think we can judge how Missouri and frankly how the United States has gone on COVID by looking at the European Union. They shut down hard for about 6 weeks, and they're coming out on the other side now. We're here in the United States, things are rising. So from President Trump to Governor Parson, this has been mismanaged, mishandled from the beginning. Representative Washington and I saw it on the House floor right before we adjourned in March when COVID really got to Missouri, where we were mocked by Republicans for being alarmist on a doomsday scenario. And I think that's how it was viewed. Now we look at Governor Parson, who's wanting to reopen schools and say that, kids, even if they get it, nothing bad's going to happen. Well, they're going to go home to their families. Bad things will happen. So it appears to me that leadership on a national and a state level, unfortunately, has been overmatched by this virus. And we need folks that are going to listen to scientists, who are going to believe in science, who are going to take advice from people who, frankly, are smarter than we are, that have studied the issue. This makes me angry. It makes me angry because, like Mr. Myers was saying, some of my favorite restaurants have closed or just now getting back open. Everybody in Kansas City should be angry here in just a few weeks when we can't go to Arrowhead to see our Chiefs. We should be through this right now. And we only have our state and national leaders to blame for the fact that we're not through it.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Well, this is a systematic failure in the United States. The reason why the United States leads the world in COVID, deaths and COVID infections as a percentage of the population is because we let the market do whatever it wants in our society. Our government officials, because they all take money from the market players, step out of the way and let the market do what it wants to do. And that is the reason that we're stuck in this. And it's a self-inflicted wound, but we're not going to do it any different unless we start to vote for different parties and we introduce democracy to this country. If we continue to compromise and just, when did the mask order go in and this kind of junk, no, we need universal health care. If in the European Union, everybody has health care. So if you get sick, you go to the doctor. Here in the United States, whether you have health care insurance or not, healthcare insurance is not having health care.
Out on the screen.
It's a block. That's somebody in between you and your health care. We need universal benefits for all people. And we gotta stop having the market for all the shots. And so we gotta stop voting for the politicians that are lapdogs to the market if we're gonna solve these type of problems.
Thank you. Next question, we'll go first to Representative Razor. In Missouri, legislation to ban employment and housing discrimination against LGBTQ people has been introduced each year for the past 2 decades, but never passed. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that workplace discrimination against LGBTQ people was a violation of the Federal Civil Rights Act. In your view, does this settle the matter in Missouri, or should the General Assembly continue discussing LGBTQ protections in the coming session? Representative Razor.
Thank you, Brian. Absolutely not. This does not settle it. And let me tell you why. I have had the honor of introducing this legislation, which we call MONA, the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, for my 4 years there. I am one of only 4 openly LGBT members of the Missouri House, and if elected, may very well be the only openly LGBT member of the state Senate. What the Supreme Court did, or what MONA does, is protect in employment, housing, and public accommodations. The Supreme Court helped us with one of those 3. So you can no longer be fired from your job. You can still be kicked out of an apartment. You can still be denied a meal at a restaurant. Also, even the employment part needs some help because Missouri's anti-discrimination laws are actually stronger than the federal government's. So there would be more people protected if Missouri included sexual orientation and gender identity into our non-discrimination ordinances or our non-discrimination laws. So I look forward to continuing the work to get this passed. We also saw in this last session there were over 20 anti-LGBT bills that were introduced. They all got hearings. They were all moving. We need openly LGBT representation in both chambers. The only time that we saw less bills introduced is when this Senate district elected Jolie Justice, who is the first and to this day the only openly LGBT person elected to the Missouri Senate. I hope to be number 2.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
Well, I second Mr. Razor's sentiments on this. Whatever your gender orientation, as far as I and the Green Party is concerned, there is no reason at all to have any different rights than anybody else. I mean, and that's all that we fight for. We don't believe that there should be any differentiation, and we believe that the law should reflect that. And that's what I will fight for, and that's what I do fight for, and the thing is that we have in this country probably the biggest political movement and the most successful political movement in this country over the last 20 years has been the LGBT community. To think how far we've come in the last 20 years, I don't think anybody would have predicted, even the most seasoned activists in the LGBT community 20 years ago. And so that momentum is, we just need to pile on and finish it. And that's exactly, what I've done and what I'll continue to do.
Ryan Myers.
Mr. Razor, I couldn't have said that better myself. Absolutely, the fight's not done. the Supreme Court, while it protects LGBT individuals in their jobs, it does leave out housing and other services. So we definitely need to get that passed in Missouri. And as the next state senator for District 9, I hope to represent all people in the district.
Barbara Ann Washington.
I'm glad that all four of us can agree on this, that this is something that we need to continue the fight. We need to continue the fight to make sure that parents have the right to treat their children the way they want to, and to stop. We need someone in the legislature that, I don't necessarily agree with Representative Ray. I don't think you have to be gay to fight for gay rights, but you have to be able to be respected enough to be listened to by the other side, and be knowledgeable enough or keen enough to get the knowledge so that you can fight some of the horrible bills that we saw come forth this year. So we do have to continue to fight for the rights of fair education and lack of bullying to LGBTQ students, both from K through 12 and our community college and college level. We have to make sure that they are able to continue to get housing, as Representative Razor has said, and other services. We should not have anyone that is discriminated against, obviously by the color of my skin. I know what discrimination is and what it feels like. I have a family that has gone through that. And so we want to continue to bring parity so that everyone can be treated fairly. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to get someone over to the legislature that understands the issues and has a loud enough mouth and a big enough voice to fight for those issues, but also has enough respect from the other side that someone will listen and we can knock down some of those bad laws.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question before the closing statements. And so we've talked about a lot of issues here tonight. We've had 9 different questions on 9 different topics so far. And yet I have a page of other questions I could have asked. What question do you wish I had asked? Or another way to put that, what issue that may not be one of the top 3 or 4 that people ask about, but that you think is still very important will be a priority for you in this session of the General Assembly, should you be elected? We'll start with Ryan Myers.
Oh, I gotta go first on this one.
Sorry about that.
Man, this is a tough one. You probably could have asked more about where our platforms are, where we stand on how we want to rebuild the economy, ideas that we had to rebuild Missouri's economy. Aside from that, I don't really know. That was a tough one.
I'll extend the question and give you a little more time. Answer the question that I should have asked as well.
So rebuilding the economy, like I said earlier, I think we need to expand our unemployment benefits to kind of kickstart the economy. Excuse me, kickstart the economy, as well as extend benefits to our small businesses so they can keep on trucking. Additionally, for funding for schools, I touched on it before. You know, we had good success in Raytown, whether it was for TIF reform, which has saved our taxpayers and our schools in Raytown millions of dollars. I'm hoping we can bring that to the Senate. And I think that's about it.
All right, thank you. Representative Washington.
The question I wish you would have asked is what other pressing issues are going to be in this special session that we need to protect? And for me, that would be raise the age in juvenile offenders. In 2018, we passed a law that said our 17-year-olds will no longer be automatically charged as adults, that would go to 18, and that is to start in January of 2021. There is a tremendous amount of pushback right now so that that law is not implemented in 2021. That is one of the issues that we will address in special session. It's one of the issues that the special task force that I'm on, our blue ribbon panel, or whatever we're called, has been working on. So that would be my #1 thing that you didn't talk about, because if we don't address, because right now when we're putting 17-year-olds, and as you know, as young as 12 can be tried as an adult. When a 12-year-old or a 17-year-old goes to prison with adults, what we're looking at when they come home is not a 12 or a 17-year-old young person. We're looking at someone who has been abused physically, mentally, and emotionally in a prison system, because they're in a prison system with adults that has a totally different purpose than the juvenile justice system, which is to treat and get them ready and try to reintegrate them into the community. as opposed to the adult system, which is to punish. So we're bringing back people that didn't get a chance to grow up, and they are frankly going to be menaces to society. Now, that's what I would have answered.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan Klein.
Well, I wish you would have asked about the global climate crisis, which is the most important issue in the world. We have thousands of PhDs in dozens of fields that for decades, 40 years or more, have been ringing alarm bells that our civilization is at risk if we do not stop our fossil fuel addiction and if we don't slow down our overheating economies. And this, if we don't get this right, nothing else matters, okay? And nobody is talking about this. The Green Party is leading on this and has for a long time. The Green Party introduced the Green New Deal in 2005. And we have the vision to save our civilization from climate catastrophe. But we are increasing our global greenhouse emissions every year. The Paris Climate Accord, most climate scientists think it's not good enough, demands this year that the United States shrink its emissions by 7.8%. Now, the COVID crisis has shrunk the emissions by less than 3%. So we need to shrink our emissions twice as much as we have this year voluntarily to meet the Paris Climate Accord, and then do it again every year for the next 10 years. That's what we need to do to save human civilization, and nobody's talking about it. That's insanity. We need to focus on what's important.
Thank you. And Greg Razor.
Brian, if I interpreted your question right, it was, we've talked about a lot of the issues that we're all talking about right now, but if there was something that kind of isn't at top of the mind that is important to us, what would that be? And for me, really the fundamental point of, or the answer to all the questions we've been asking and discussing tonight, it all comes back to education. And when we talk about education, we rightfully put most of the focus on K-12. And that is the core of everything. But I am passionate about higher education, and that is everything from trade schools to community colleges to our four-year institutions. And we are letting those crumble in the state of Missouri. The state of higher education and the lack of funding we are providing, the amount of debt we are putting on students, if they're even able to get the loans to get that debt in the first place, is amazing. We have students that are coming out of colleges in the state of Missouri now who are not as educated as well as I was by Missouri public universities, who have essentially a house mortgage strapped to their back. That is going to hinder them for a decade or more. It's going to hinder the entire economy. Those folks are no longer buying those first houses as soon as they would have. They're no longer buying the cars, which some people might say isn't a big deal. It is a big deal if you're producing that car and you're a UAW worker. We need to really refocus what we're doing as a state. I think higher education is such a key, and it's something that we don't talk enough about.
All right, thank you very much. So it's time for closing statements. And as we go to each of you for your 2-minute closing statement, I'll remind our viewers who they are, who is running against whom, and which district and which party each person represents. So we'll start with the 7th district. If you vote in the 7th district and you pick up a Green Party ballot, there will be one name on it, and it is that of Nathan Klein. Nathan Klein, 2 minutes.
Let us be honest. At this point, the Democratic and Republican parties only represent large campaign contributors, not communities and voters. They are well paid to maintain the corporate status quo that is working so well for the rich, but not for us. Neither seriously addresses the multiple growing crises of climate change, entrenched racism, economic inequality, and a lack of access to decent healthcare, education, housing, and the other necessities of life. The complete capitalist corporate takeover of the Democratic and Republican parties, and thus our government, has eliminated them as vehicles for the dramatic changes that we must have to avoid things getting worse than they already are. Luckily for America, the Green Party has been building the revolutionary political vehicle that can steer us through these difficult times to a peaceful, just, and sustainable future. Because the Green Party voluntarily refuses all corporate campaign donations. The Green Party, unlike any other party, represents voters and communities as opposed to campaign contributors who have hoarded the wealth of our nation. Because the Green Party is the only volunteer-based political party in the United States, the Green Party is the only party made up of working people volunteering their time in egalitarian movement to bring democracy to our country and to rescue it from the plutocracy that it has succumbed to. That is why I humbly offer myself to you today, my neighbors, as a Green Party candidate to represent the Missouri Senate District in Jefferson City. I, like all Green Party candidates, am a clean green candidate. I will not take the dirty money that corrupts all that it touches at the Capitol. That will make all the difference in who I represent when I am elected. I invite you to join the Green Party movement today, not only to elect me to the Missouri Senate, but to wrest our government from corporate hands and make our tax dollars work for us, working folks in our communities. They say that the Green Party is the spoiler. What we say is that we cannot spoil what is already rotten. We must replace the rotten with the fresh, green alternative of the Green Party. I invite you to join today.
Thank you, sir. If you are voting in the 7th District and you pick up a Democratic ballot, there will be 2 names on it, Michael Brown, who is not with us tonight, and Greg Razor. Mr. Razor, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Brian, again for hosting this, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this together. The 2 districts that we're hearing from tonight, the 7th and the 9th, make up the core of Kansas City, and we've been without a senator in either of those districts now for a year. The 2 people that leave Kansas City and go to Jefferson City over the course of the next 4 years are going to have a really tough job. We have dug ourselves into a hole in the state of Missouri over the course of the last 20 years in so many respects. It is time that we start digging ourselves out of that hole. And that process is not going to happen overnight. That process is not going to happen in 1 year. It is going to take dedicated public servants who are willing to do the hard work, to show up, to be responsive to their constituents, and to work with people on both sides of the aisle in Jefferson City. That's what I've done in the House. It's what I will do in the Senate. The work is going to be hard, but it's going to be rewarding when we see Missouri become a better place for all of us to live. That's why I'm running. That's why I want to represent the 7th District, the city of Kansas City, and it's why I'm asking for your vote on August the 4th.
Thank you very much. Now, if you live in the 9th Senate District and you pick up the Republican ballot, you will find 1 name on it, Mr. David Martin, who is not with us tonight. If you pick up the Democratic ballot in the 9th District, there will be 2 names. And so we'll hear the closing statements first from Representative Barbara Washington.
Hi. I'll disagree a little bit to start off with my colleague. We have not been without senators for a year, but they have not been in since January, so this session. However, I do agree with him that it's going to take a strong voice to represent the 9th District in the southern part, in the Kansas City south of the border, or south of the river. And that person's going to have already started the job, which is what I've been able to do during my 3 years in Jefferson City. I've already started the job. I've already followed around Senator Curls for the 3 years that I was there and started laying the foundation for the relationships that are important and crucial in Jefferson City to get some things moving. By doing that, I've been effective in bringing much needed money back to Jackson County. My district is a tourism district. My office sits on 18th and Vine now. And even through COVID, by establishing the relationships that I have in the 3 years, I protected our most precious jewels that we can from a state perspective, and that is the museums here on 18th and Vine. I was still able to bring back much needed funding for workforce development and much needed funding for mental health. So I've been effective, and you want someone who's been effective. You want someone who's experienced. In addition to being in Jefferson City, I know how I have managed to establish relationships there and throughout my own community in Kansas City, so that I know where to plug those holes in, so that I know how to use my friendships, my businesships, and my relationships to fill the holes when we need money for Metropolitan Community College, or if there's something that Metropolitan Community College can do with the state, or if there's something that a nonprofit or a profit company like Cisco, who has been very diligent in donating because of my efforts. Someone who is engaged and recognizes and identifies the issues that we have in our community. Like when COVID started, I immediately began to get funding and food for over 2,000 children a day, and we still feed those kids breakfast and lunch every single day, and we've done that since the beginning of March. So I am the best candidate because I am engaged, I am effective, and I am experienced, and I have the relationships to go and continue doing good work and fighting the good fight and being the strong voice for District 9.
Thank you. And finally, Councilman Ryan Myers.
Yep, I'm on mute. Thank you. So this is definitely going to be a tough job going forward. I am looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting to work and representing everyone in all parts of this district and in Senate District 9. I want to be able to take what I have been able to get done, my record of results in Raytown as Mayor Pro Tem and as a city councilman in Raytown. I was able to get done rental regulations, which has made our neighborhoods in Raytown safer and cleaner. I passed TIF reform, which has saved our taxpayers and our schools millions of dollars. And I've also implemented our Board of Aldermen ethics code, which has brought transparency and accountability to our local government. These are things that I got done that I want to bring to our entire Senate district. We need somebody that has that record of results, that can get things done. I want to be able to be responsive to my constituents. As a city councilman in Raytown, I have a 24-hour rule that if someone contacts me, I respond within 24 hours. That rule has not been broken yet. So in terms of transparency, I want to be transparent with my voters, with the constituents, and with all residents within District 9. And I'm committed to being the best representative for District 9. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you. This is the point in a forum where if we were all together in person, I would invite the audience to join me in applause of appreciation and thanks for all of you. Since they are all muted, I will now just applaud on behalf of the entire audience. Thank you all so much for being part of this. And thanks again to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event and for inviting me to moderate. I'll turn it back over to Cheryl Barnes for a final word.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks to all of you for joining us. We encourage you to take a look at your ballot, which you can find on the League's website, www.lwvkc.org, and click on Vote 411, where you'll find information that the candidates have provided. And then we ask you to vote on August 4th. There are a lot of very important issues. Again, our sincere thanks to the candidates, and thanks to all of you for participating. Good night.